All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on commercial bank strategic performance with KPIs. Um, this is a follow-up event. We had a surprising amount of interest in our recent webinar that focused on central banking at reserve banks and such. That recording is still available on our website if you're interested in that particular topic. Today's session will cover the basics of strategic KPI development and implementation, strategy implementation, and so forth within the context of commercial bank strategy. We have two presenters who will each draw on their broad experience to make this real for you all. As they present, I know that there'll be some questions that'll come up. If you could, please use the Q&A box on the Zoom menu rather than the chat feature. That way we can efficiently find the answers. There you go. So if you rather than use the chat feature, use the Q&A feature. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about our presenters before I turn things over to Joe and Don. Joe DiCarlo is a senior vice president and senior consulting associate with Strategy Management Group and Balanced Scorecard Institute. He's got decades of experience in strategic planning, KPI development, balanced scorecard implementation, change management, business model innovation, and related elements across private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector, you name it. He's one of our most seasoned consultants. He's managed and supported strategic and performance management projects for hundreds of organizations in every imaginable sector, from Cisco to ADP to the Federal Ministry of Health in Ethiopia, a huge number of financial institutions around the world. He's got an MBA. He's a certified balanced scorecard master professional, KPI professional, project manager, master professional, and so forth. So, if you're looking for advice on this topic, Joe's the guy. Joining Joe today is Don May. He is a global account executive at Spider Strategies. Um, there he focuses on helping organizations use Spider Impact software to improve their strategic performance through data-driven insights, effective strategy execution, and so forth. His team is who we look to when our clients need help, tracking their KPIs, linking initiatives to KPIs, visualizing performance, reporting performance, managing your agendas, data week in and week out of your meetings using dashboards and briefing books and so forth. Anything that is needed to turn strategic plans into an actionable, measurable result. Um, so once Joe's finished telling us about the basics of strategy and KPI development, Don will do a demo. He'll show us what a system of KPIs might look like within the context of a commercial bank. Again, within the context of a Spider Impact software context. All right. So without further ado, Joe,
All
take it.
right, thank you, David, and good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone that's attending today. Um, and First of all, I'd like to level set with some of the bank definitions. Now, those of you that may have attended the central bank one that we did last month are going to see something entirely different because in the commercial bank world, everything it's all about a profitability outcome, end outcome at the highest level. Where central banks are working from a government mandate, looking at fiscal policy, monetary policy, et cetera. They don't interact with what I call the consumer level or even organizational level because that's not their mandate. They're to keep stability of the financial and monetary systems within countries. And when you cross that line into the commercial bank side, it's going into what I call any other normal for-profit making organization. And because commercial banks have to make a profit on all of the different products, all of the support, all those other things that they give out to consumers, to businesses, mortgages, loans, all that kind of business that they go through. And they are the most common. And again, savings, checking, loans, personal auto, credit cards. The one thing that many commercial banks also do is they have agreements with brokerage services to buy and sell stock. I mean, within the confines of their system. So if I've got a large account set up to hold money for stock uh, purchases or investments, I can do that right in the same set of screens when I log on. I can move it from my checking account to my savings. I can move it right over and do stock trades with the companies as well. Another term you'll hear is credit unions. Now, these are member-owned. They are unlike, and the one that I'm most familiar with over the years is Bank of America, because my wife was in Bank of America through positions of auditor and all the way through what they called the master of all functions, a traveler, go to assist, etc. And so I got very intimately engaged with what goes on in the case of Bank of America. And I also have a credit union account. Now, the credit union account was something that my employer back in starting in 1985 told me that, you had to have an account here because that's where we're going to send your paycheck, every month. And so to this day, I still do have two accounts, one with Bank of America and one with, in this case, Think Bank, which was the old credit union for the IBM Corporation back in the late 80s. But they are member owned. And so they're not non-profit, not for profit, but they do use the same services that commercial banks do. You'll also see in some cases they'll call themselves a savings bank. And so they're focusing on deposits and loans, specializing in mortgage. So very similar, all three of those up there. And then we have on the frontier now, and it's not the frontier, as you'll see in just a minute. We're removing everything that you can see in brick and mortar from a typical bank where you walk in and do your transactions or walk in and use their ATMs, but they're now fully digital banks or neobanks, as one of the terminologies is. They operate almost exclusively online. They offer a range of services through all digital platforms. So it's the epitome of don't go anywhere, do everything online or from your device or wherever it happens to be. Now, to give you some background on these neobanks or online banks, I did some research on this because we're familiar here in the States with one that is on this list that I'm familiar with, which is Chime. And you really don't go anywhere. I mean, to get anything, but they do have now an ATM network because eventually all of us need cash for some reason, whatever the reason might be. And my personal reason is when I go offshore to other countries and I know they accept the dollar, I will still sometimes want to make sure that I have the dollars in the right denominations. Or in some cases, I'll just use my bank card and pull it out in their currency so that I'm covered with if I have incidental expenses that need to be in the foreign currency. So, but there's quite a few, and this is the source in the footer for these particular ones. But it was a great diagram because it showed visually the difference between neobanks, which is like 100% mobile, really not any brick and mortar locations. You can do online banking and mobile apps, but between digital banks, which again typically do not have any brick and mortar locations, they're all on the internet, and also then the traditional banks, which bridge between being a digital bank. I like, and when I come up every month, get my statement from Bank of America, I go through it and I do it all online. The only time I go to a branch is when I need cash in certain denominations, and then I'll get a stand in line at the counter, and give me 120s, 110s, 105s, whatever I want to take out, which the ATMs typically can't carry that kind of delineate definition between currencies or denomination amounts. Traditional banks still deal with face-to-face, though they've shrunk in size. And I can say categorically for the commercial banks I've worked with, they're always analyzing, what is the right balance between face-to-face services and what's needed on the digital side. Now, on the other hand, we've got all kinds of typical services that banks do that central banks don't do for consumers, families, businesses. I mean, I think the ones that are on here, and some of these repeat from what I just said before for neo and online banks. The one that's interesting again is the investment side. And I mentioned, like in the case, I did a check last night on Bank of America, and I must have seen at least. I'm sorry, I did a global search. What are typical brokerage firms that banks strike deals with in order to buy and sell stock? And that list was over 15 different brokerage services. So that's a big part of their environment. And the other thing that was kind of cute on this one that I put in here was the piggy bank. I mean, I'm a baby boomer by generation, and I remember very explicitly, like it was yesterday, my parents started me out with a piggy bank. I dropped change, they put bills in there and that kind of thing. And our younger couples that we know with kids, they're doing the same thing with their kids because it starts anchoring in that thought and that culture about saving money. And now they can see it here at the bank side or with the piggy bank. I mean, again, these things are all pretty standard. The euro is meant to be different currencies. I got the pounds over there. You can get that, and you can in some of the branches here in San Jose. I can take any of my unused currencies from the countries I've traveled in. They will take it and convert it at the current rate, and so I'm not holding on to currencies that I can't use here in the state. But anyway, it's a different environment than the central, but it's critical. And and on this business about mortgages and that kind of thing, and all I have to do is think back to 2008 when we had basically a bottoming out with the mortgage problem that was created in the U.S. And so that's the front line. It's front line with consumers and businesses going forward. And so now, in relationship to strategy and KPI development, this is our pyramid of the various layers of strategy development. It starts out with a very clear analysis of competition as well as the customer value proposition and stakeholder value proposition, and builds on it from the end in mind, which is the mission. And now, in this case, central banks were mission driven because their end outcome for the constituents or for the country's citizens is a better quality of life. That's what central banks exist for. Commercial banks, on the other hand, is all about resolving that vision, which I can't say it in any other way. It's just basically making money because those bank shares are usually traded in the public domain. And so it is just like any other for-profit business. But downstream for the various components or strategic components, we get to eventually you got to start measuring exactly what those things are. And you can see there, I've marked this pyramid up that those two bottom layers are all about strategy execution. You got your strategy done when you created your strategic objectives and look back up. Strategy execution now is putting that in play, putting it to work, and more importantly, working the things that you created strategic objectives for and measuring against those. And so I put this small graphic off to the right because we constantly get phone calls from potential clients to say, I need some KPIs for this. I need some KPIs for that. And our first question is, well, do you have a strategy? Do you have them specified as their strategic objectives anywhere? And typically the answer sometimes is no. I mean, I just went through this at the end of last year at an offshore meeting with one of the neobanks, online banks, and their comment was, and during the session was, yeah, everybody's asking about why are we going through all of these measures? What are we hoping to resolve or achieve with these measures? And I let them continue until there was a pause, and I just asked the one question. I said, do you have a document that shows all of your strategic objectives and the intended results that those were supposed to approve when you got your KPIs associated to that? And there was dead silence in the room. And I said, well, then I think that's your problem. You've created KPIs, but you don't have them connected to anything that's strategic. And there has to be strategic context going forward. And so when we take a look at how we can get there on those kind of things, with a number of techniques that we can use, and obviously direct is the best because you know where the data is and where it can be located, and you can get your hands on it very easily. Sometimes it's got to be indirect. You'll use some techniques like process flow, cause and effect, logic model to get there. And then also things like the composite indice. You'll have a series of operational KPIs that you can use as a group and put that through as an index. And indexes are one thing that both commercial banks and commercial banks are well aware of because every country at the end of every quarter reports typically out on their consumer price index, which has got a whole bunch of component measures in there that they look at to come up with that number. So that's one of the things that that automation or performance management systems resolve very quickly. And it doesn't really matter about size of your organization, because now when you've got automation and performance management systems, you can do these things very quickly. And it's a nice way of saying you'll eventually abandon the Excel spreadsheet approach and get your system making those same outputs that you're looking at. Now, as an example for what we're going to use with Don and what I've experienced from the commercial banks I've worked with, I put together a fictitious commercial bank balance scorecard and attempted what I consider to be the high level ones that are the most important to those that are out there today. Obviously, in terms of a balanced scorecard, you've got these perspectives. They are financial is at the top because, again, they're a money making organization, as opposed to what you saw last month. Customer was up on top for the commercial, for the central banks, and financial was underneath that. But for commercials, it's all about making the money. It's all about making your revenue streams. It's all about reducing your costs. And I put some ideal ones in there that surfaced on the most from the example, the clients that I worked with that are commercial. Now, when we get down to customer, there's no question about it. Customer satisfaction index is critical. And many people also use the net promoter score. Why? Because of that chart of definition of types of commercial banks, everyone usually in some countries has an option. Can I stay with this bank I'm with now? Or can I go down a couple of blocks and open up an account with a credit union? Or can I go up, open up an account with a savings bank? Because it is relatively easy to create banks. You have to follow the regulations and the regulatory aspects of where you are. But if you got a nest of cash that you want to open up a bank and put that cash to work, you can usually make a pretty good return on what you're going to do as a business entity. So obviously, customer retention is major. I mean, because once you've got those accounts owners captured for whatever services you're going to provide them, I mean, it's easier to keep them retained and to go out and create new, you find new ones. You've got to keep also working your market share because there's competition out there. And then the last thing is you got to make sure that your brand is accepted and also that you make a big deal out of creating CSR or a corporate social responsibility or ESG programs because the bank becomes an intimate cog in the culture of wherever that bank is now. And I always tell the banking customers I work with, do not be shy about reporting out, communicating, promoting what you do in CSR and ESG because the community needs to know that and that you're investing funds to help out schools, to help out sports teams, doing whatever you can do. I mean, as a bank, because you're part of the fabric of the culture now in that location. Internal processes, the sky is almost the limit here. But these are the key ones that I found in the past, which is around product innovation and responsiveness. You got to constantly look at what new products come out because if you're not doing it, your competitors are doing it. Or in this case, your competitors in an entirely different structure like those neobanks or digital banks. You have to be efficient about what you do in terms, and you have to constantly look at process automation. This one goes without saying. In fact, in these days, this cybersecurity business is right at the top of the list. The National Association of Corporate Directors that I belong to, this one is always on the top of their list for corporate boards to be aware of. What's the cybersecurity strength that we have? You always have to analyze your risk. I mean, the thing that caught everyone by surprise here on the 2008 failure was the risk was like almost ignored. I mean, they were cutting mortgages for people that didn't have any way of paying back those mortgages. There weren't any guardrails, as I call it now, because we're hearing that about AI, guardrails on AI. Well, we got to get the guardrails from 2008 back in place for the commercial banks. And then you have to improve your internal and external communication. Some people think just creating the web page is sufficient. It's not. That's passive. You expect people to go to the web page to get the information. You have to be more proactive. So, for instance, I still sign up with Bank of America to send me regular mail so I can see what's coming out, not only in my statements but also any communications that they got through going on. Excuse me. And last but not least, but most important, is the people, tools, and technology perspective. What are your engagement indexes? When that teller has a line with 5 people in it, how are they handling that pressure as they look out and see 5 people standing there, tapping their foot, looking up in the air, wondering when they're going to be serviced and how they're going to be serviced? So that business about engagement really has to be focused on quite a bit. You have to keep them constantly knowledgeable of the skills and abilities that they need to use the systems that you have in place, and also keeping your pipeline full, because at least here in the States, keeping those pipeline jobs full is still a struggle now. And then of course you've got two things related to technology, which is you got to have the right infrastructure in place with the base technical systems that the commercial bank has to operate on, and then eventually and make sure that those systems are being used by all factors in the commercial bank. Let's turn over to Don now, and he'll pick up with what Spider can do in terms of impact to do this kind of performance reporting and monitoring and evaluation. Don?
Thanks, Joe. Let me share my screen. Okay, just double checking to make sure you can see it. Okay, fantastic. All right, so thanks everyone. My name is Don May. I'm a global account executive here at Spider Strategies, coming to you from right outside Boston, Massachusetts. I myself am an elder millennial / zennial, so I've come across all the different types of the commercial banks that Joe just went over. I have accounts at basically every single type that he listed today. What we're going to do, though, is talk about Spider Impact, which is a world-leading strategy management platform that is designed to take your organization to the next level by capturing, visualizing, and using data to drive your strategic decisions, right? So our software can help you gather all of your data in one place, update it automatically, and then provide insights to keep everyone working towards the same goals. Let's use that in the context of a commercial bank, right? So in the next few minutes, I'll sort of walk you through how a commercial bank would utilize a software like ours to track KPIs, strategic initiatives, and then visualize success in real time. But first, let's talk a little bit about some of the difficulties that you might face, whether you're a commercial bank or any other type of organization, and that is these KPIs that you've created, right? They might get siloed, whether it's across different departments or branches. You've got different parts of the business doing different things. No one is working towards the same objective. And that can get difficult to figure out, how are we actually performing? Next, you might be running strategic initiatives that are designed to improve performance in particular areas, but you're not having any success tracking them, right? So maybe you're running them in Excel, or maybe you have them in some third-party software, but then those results are not being linked directly to your strategy. So you're not really sure, if you're having the impact that you want on those particular KPIs or objectives. And then lastly, the lack of performance, real-time performance visibility. So maybe you have the KPIs, maybe you are tracking them, but now no one can really see it, right? There's no centralized location for everyone to go to in order to find out that information to determine if you're actually succeeding in the way that you want. And so that's kind of what Spider Impact, that's not kind of, it's exactly what Spider Impact represents, right? So let's take a look at the commercial bank strategy map that Joe just displayed. So in our software, this would be a live dashboard where you could see your performance across those 4 different perspectives with the 12 objectives all in one place. And I'd be able to take a look at this and say, okay, here is the strategy map for our commercial bank. We have all of these different objectives that Joe just talked about. How are we performing? How are we trending? in each of these. And so this is live. So if I go to my time indicator here, I could go back to May or to April, and you can see that what it's doing is it's pulling the performance for that particular time period from the scorecard that it sits over, right? And so if I'm looking at this and I'm a commercial bank and I'm looking to maybe enhance revenue or decrease non-performing loans, what I might do is go in and now I have a scorecard. And so within Spider Impact, what you're able to do is create not only balanced scorecards, but any other type of scorecard that you need in order to track the KPIs and strategic objectives that you're trying to achieve. And within this framework, right, you have this capability of having traditional balanced scorecard, right? So perspectives, objectives with individual metrics, right, underpinning them. And so you have this ability to have what we like to call normalized scoring. And so this is going to allow you, based on the thresholds that you assign to each of the KPIs, to give each metric a score that rolls up all the way to each perspective or to each or the overall scorecard, right? So this commercial bank scorecard right now has an overall score of 5.4. That is based on the underlying perspectives that are all currently being weighted equally. And then underneath those perspectives, you have the objectives, right? So if I were to click on financial stewardship, you can see here that we have 3 different objectives that give you what that financial stewardship score of 7.7. So if I take a look at enhanced revenue, I have these different, now I have an objective, right, that I'm trying to achieve, and I have KPIs. So things like total revenue, fee income as a percentage, non-performing loan ratios. So these are all different KPIs that, came off of that list that now I can have in a scorecard that are all right next to each other, right? So this is monetary, or this might be a percentage. Something like return on equity is actually calculated, or return on assets are calculated, where there's actually an equation that underpins that. So I'm bringing in maybe 2 different KPIs and letting the system do the math to generate the score that I'm going to see. So from there, once I have these KPIs listed, I can put them all into the same scorecard that generates me a perspective score or an objective score, or even an overall scorecard score. To drive some of these KPIs, what I might do is run initiatives, right? And so if I'm running initiatives, now I have the ability to align my initiatives with my strategic objectives. So here, maybe we're going to launch pricing optimization models for loans and deposits. We're going to have some tasks like analyzing our historical pricing data, design price model features. I've got subtasks, right? Identifying key drivers. And all of these are contained within the actual platform. Some key things to note about our initiatives is that, for each individual task and milestone, as you add status updates, the system is going to predict if you're going to be on time and on budget for that particular task. It's then going to aggregate that all the way up to the initiative level to tell you whether or not it believes you're going to be on time and on budget for the initiative. But the key magic to this is that you can also align it with a specific objective or KPI that you're trying to affect. And so in this instance, maybe we're doing this so that we can, have our non-performing loan ratio be at a better level. And so I've assigned that to this initiative, and the system is going to tell me whether or not it believes I'm having a positive, negative, or no impact on that, metric or objective as well. So it's going to tell me why it believes that. It's going to deliver this little report to me once it has enough data so that I'm able to tell, is what I'm doing actually driving performance? I can also see how the initiative is performing in the dashboard level. So if I have this initiative, I can see, okay, how am I doing on all the different tasks and milestones? What is my progress look like? How am I doing from a budget perspective? And then also, a report on how each individual task is being completed and the money spent. So all of that is contained here, but again, it's all linked directly to that specific KPI of non-performing loan ratio. If I'm an executive or I run a specific bank or branch, right, I'm going to want to see, how is my overall performance doing? And so within our software, now you have this capability of having comparisons where I can see the overall performance of the bank. I can see it compared to branch 1 versus branch 2 versus branch 3. I can dig in and, click onto branch 1, dive into the actual metrics itself. And now I have a dashboard that's going to show me, how am I performing on my revenue goals, right? Joe talked about customer satisfaction being a particular KPI that you really have to stay on top of because everyone has choices. And so here I have it listed on the retail banking revenue dashboard. This is branch one, maybe I have one for branch two, but if I want to see it for the overall bank, right, I have this capability of going back, and now I can see, okay, how are we doing? Maybe it's nationally. And so now I've increased the complexity of my dashboard, and now maybe I even have revenue by geography. So I can dig into, in Massachusetts, I can see exactly how are we doing within Massachusetts, within specific zip codes. And I have that capability of now I can really dive in to the metric to figure out where the performance is coming from. And then I can back out and I can say, oh, you know what, that's great in Mass. Let's take a look at California, right? And it'll dive in for me. So the system is still reading the information that's contained in the scorecards and in data sets, which I'll get into in a second, that allow me to derive this information. And again, it's all predicated upon what time period am I looking at. So one of the key features of Spider Impact is that we have dynamically changing calendars where I could simply come here and say, hey, I want to look at Q2 or Q1 or the year, right? And so I can just simply come here, make this change, and all of this, the information is going to aggregate based upon how I've told it for this particular time frame. Let's go back to monthly for June 2025. So if I go back into the scorecards, you might be thinking, okay, that's great. I've got a scorecard created. How do I get the data in? And so there's multiple ways that you can do this. You always have the ability within our software to just enter the value, right? So I can either enter the value from manually by typing it in or choosing a selection from a dropdown or what have you. I have the ability to add notes to provide context around that particular performance for that KPI as well. But then I can utilize, it's 2025, we can utilize technology, and I can say, hey, this information lives in either another system or an Excel spreadsheet or a database, right? And so now I can automate that process by getting that data to come in directly from that particular software platform or SQL database or Google Sheet or the Excel spreadsheet that we're using to track. I can schedule this so that it comes in at regular intervals. So the data comes in, it automatically updates the metric itself, and then anything that is attached to the metric, whether it be a chart, a report, or a dashboard, gets automatically updated as well. So if we were to see the July numbers, you would have that as well. So all of that's a great way for you to avoid having to do a lot of manual effort in order to update these metrics. Once you have them all set up, you can just schedule the automation process, and now all of these dashboards would be updated based on the performance for that particular time period. At the same time, if you don't have it in a system and you can't just pull it in or have someone type it in manually, we also have forms that you can utilize. So maybe there's a customer satisfaction survey or an employee satisfaction survey or some other type of information that you need to get into the system to populate the data for one of these KPIs. You can utilize a form that you can send to someone outside of Spider Impact. They can fill out this information, click the submit button. It comes into our system as a data set. And then I can utilize that for either KPIs or for dashboards, right? That would show the results. And again, these are going to automatically update as well once that submit button is clicked. So you don't have to chase and figure out where the information is. Once you have it mapped, this survey results dashboard would update automatically with the new form submission, which is great. Just a couple of final things. So, these graphics, this one is not really necessarily tailored to a commercial bank, but I just wanted to see you the complexity of or the creativity that you could utilize when you're building out these dashboards within your system so that, you can make them look as nice as you want to. You have this ability in here to go in and create dashboards from the templates that we have, or you can just, add whether it's widgets with scorecards, speedometers, you can add notes, you could add with text, HTML elements, shapes, all to create these dashboards on your own. And then lastly, you put it all together in what we call a briefing. So you saw me displaying this at the beginning. So this is where I have this presentation piece where now I am in a situation where I have my June performance review. We're sitting in a meeting, we're having this conversation. We see that our market share is red and trending down. We can click, we can dive in, we can look to see what's going on here. We can see the trend, right, over the past 12 months. And then we can even launch a new initiative designed to drive performance in that particular KPI. and then head right back up into our presentation and keep it moving, right? So this is a great way for you to save time, because again, just like everything else, as soon as the new information is brought into the system for the KPIs and the objectives, this data automatically gets updated on its own. And you can utilize really any piece of content that you built inside the software to put into your briefing, and then bring in outside pieces as well, so that you have the capability of just having this meeting in one place. You can then export it out to PowerPoint or PDF. You can even schedule that process if you'd like, so that people who are attending this meeting get the data in a hard copy. Or you could just have it, they could just subscribe to it, so that as soon as you publish it in the system, they get an alert letting them know that the report is ready for them to look at. So all that's there. Happy to give you guys a personalized demo based upon your specific banking situation or organizational situation. But great to show this to you. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Don. Candace or David, anything else I can think of, or you guys can think of, or Candace, do we want to go to the Q&A?
That's great. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Don. Fantastic job. Very, very interesting. So if anybody has any questions, again, please go to the Q&A box in the Zoom menu, post your question, and we will, it looks like we've got about 20 minutes or so. We can answer as many questions as you have. While the questions are coming in, let me kick things off. I was talking to somebody recently about the banking industry, and they were talking about the commercial bank strategic environment and how it used to be thought of as a relatively stable environment. You can picture the branding with the pillars, and it was all about projecting stability and economic success and so forth. Now, as Joe detailed and I think you both talked to, it seems like in recent years that environment has changed with issues like cryptocurrency and digital services and security threats and artificial intelligence and all that. There's so many things that are hitting people at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about how these changes have impacted your clients' approach to strategy management? How do they think about this differently, and why? Joe, you want to go first?
Sure. One of the things with this change in almost availability of an infrastructure to move into different types of banks, neo, online only, etc. One of the things that's causing what I'll classify them as the traditional banks, brick and mortar, they've had to step back and look at, very simplistic things like, what are our branch hours? Do we have the right branch hours? They've also looked at more discreetly and going through this transition, and I will categorically say this from my experience here in San Jose, the number of Bank of America branches has been shuttered. I mean, because they can pick up more customer interfacing, et cetera, through the digital side that they have in mind. And so the competition, again, has sent a clear shot across the bow saying, we're available 24/7, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have anything that requires things like a loan or getting hard cash, you either got to do the ATMs or you got to come into the branches. Don, I don't know if you picked up anything else from your side.
The biggest thing that we've seen is the reason that you get a strategic performance platform is because you have to do more with less, right? So whether that's less resources or less people, you're doing actually a lot more work because you have to, worry about the crypto, you have to worry about the loans, the credit cards, right? But you have sort of less people to do it. And so the ability to track all that information really helps, because again, it can get so siloed. You've got one person that might be responsible for two different things. And so having that information readily available to everyone, giving that transparency, is really what they're keen on. They just want to be able to see, all the efforts of the performance, because they just have less people around to do it.
Mm-hmm. So Don, yeah, the same person was talking about how the bank has all kinds of systems in the background. They have business intelligence systems, and is there talk a little bit about the benefit of having a tool that's easier and more it's designed specifically to create dashboards and such, rather than having to go through all the work to create that in a business intelligence system.
So when you have a system that is designed to create dashboards, it makes it a lot easier, because, we've taken sort of some of the work out of it for you. Our system makes it really easy for you to just utilize widgets that you can just click on and say, hey, I want to bring this piece of information onto the actual dashboard, as opposed to trying to figure out, how do I make this other piece of software do what I want from a dashboard perspective. Because a lot of different ERPs and business software, they have sort of dashboard elements, but they're there secondarily, right? Where our main focus is how do you visualize this data that you have inside the system. And the beauty of it is even if you have it in that other third-party system, you can still bring it into Spider and then utilize our visualizations to show you as well. So now you have the data that's coming from a Power BI or something like that inside Spider, and then you're using our very easy, intuitive dashboard maker to now visualize that information. And it just makes it a lot easier because it's way easier for me as an employee to see, okay, I'm red, green, or yellow in a particular item. And I go back in time and I change the dynamic time periods to quarters or years. And I can kind of see how I'm doing. I can see the trends. A lot easier than trying to figure out filters and all of these things in other pieces of software.
Okay. All right, so some of the questions are rolling in. We've got one question about AI. Most banks are adopting AI to find insights from their data and KPIs. Whether you have asking whether you've come across that scenario and how do you use AI with impact?
Is that directed to me first?
Yeah,
Don, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so AI is really just a huge part of our lives. You'll see in some of our next rollouts here, different ways that you can utilize AI within Spider Impact to not only help you figure out exactly what's happening with a particular metric, but also to generate charts and reports very easily for you by just going in and typing. So you'll be able to search, how many of this did I sell in a particular time frame, or how many loans were non-performing in a particular time period, utilizing AI for that. But we try to keep it, pretty strict because AI can also be incorrect, right? And so you want to make sure that you have it really structured to help you, to not give you, I guess, wrong information. But you could take the information that you're getting from the AI searches or AI inquiries that you're doing. If it's helping you generate specific metrics or campaigns that you're running, you can place those in as initiatives, run them within Spider Impact, and really link them to your strategic objectives to see how that's performing for you.
Joe, do you want to touch on AI at all?
Yeah, in fact, I'll use a little example that I witnessed last time I went into the bank branch, and I was thoroughly surprised about the conversation I overheard. Was this person was saying, "I don't understand why I got this note about this and whatever." I looked at my bank statements, etc., and as the teller was trying to explain it, she dropped the words AI or the letters AI, and I didn't have to see the person's face. It was just their conversation started with "What's AI?" And so I thought there's a classic example of when you do have to have this face-to-face conversations. And let's face it, when you're dealing with mortgages, your balances, your credit card balances, whatever, eventually, just because it was done with something with AI, those that have to deliver the answers to those questions really need to be trained about how to do that. And it was a classic case, I think, in this case, not to undercut the knowledge levels of what tellers are, but they should have done it immediate because the customer had documentation in their hand, should have been flagging down the branch manager or assistant branch manager and say, "I got to put you in touch with these folks." So that's one thing about don't get in too far out to the fringe with something like AI unless you know how you're going to be able to explain what exactly happened in this particular case.
It's a useful tool. We all are sort of learning how to use it, right? It's one of those things. A digital assistant, I think, is going to be something we're all using day in and day out. But you have to be really careful not to overuse it in any of these scenarios, I think.
Yeah.
Rely on the answer that it's spitting out as your go-to answer. All right, Kyle says, how can commercial banks ensure their strategy stays relevant in such a rapidly evolving environment? What are the early warning signs that a bank's strategic plan is no longer working? How can banks balance long-term vision with short-term market pressures? Joe, do you want to go first?
Sure. Just like any other organization that we've worked with, in any industry sector, that whole schedule of strategy, execution, monitoring, and evaluation needs to be implicitly anchored in the culture of the company. I mean, once you've gone through the process of creating a strategy, gone through the process of bringing in a performance management system like Impact to help you monitor and evaluate it, you have to meet on a very regular basis to ask the tough questions about what's being reported out. It's not just a matter of sitting in a conference room and rolling through what the results were. People have to know that there's a safe zone in there where they can ask questions about, why is this happening like this? What do we need to talk about on that? I just noticed across town the 3 more branches of some bank opened up, and we didn't know about that. We had no intelligence gathering that goes on. And I think sometimes companies that we've worked with, we take them through the process of building a strategy, getting it implemented, getting it automated, like what Impact does, and they think that, oh, we can go on cruise control now. We have to don't ask these questions. They always have to challenge, and obviously now with the introduction of AI possibly in the background, you have to challenge it even more to make sure that you're getting the right results. Don, anything to add on that?
Yeah, what I would say is, so that's sort of how our software is developed, where you have the initiatives, right, to show you the impact that they're having on some of the strategic objectives or KPIs that you're running. But at the same time, the software allows you to set specific alerts, right? So if there's competitive KPIs or specific KPIs that are indicators for you of, how the market is moving, you get alerts in your email or via the system to tell you, what's happening, what value they're at, so that you can make adjustments. And even though it's in our system, right, the system is not static. So you're able to say, okay, maybe under the enhanced revenue objective, we had this metric. Well, starting next month, that metric is dead and we need to move on to something else. So what you do is you archive that first metric and you start the new one, and it continues on now with the new information. And so you're able, it's like a living, breathing sort of strategy that you can still adjust even though it's in the system. And I think that that's how you stay ahead of it, right? If you just, like you said, put it in the system, put it on cruise control, never make any changes, you might in 6 months be too far behind to catch up. So the ability of the system to allow you to run those initiatives, to give you the information around how those initiatives are performing for those particular objectives, and then your ability to archive and make changes, makes it a living, breathing sort of strategy that you can adjust as you move through.
Mhm. Good point. Yeah, so it's a matter of maybe connecting the dots between what you're saying, Don, is initiatives and the outcomes you're trying to achieve. I'm wondering if a lot of our clients will talk through risk. I mean, I'm guessing most of these banks have risk management offices within their organization. Can you identify risk, a potential risk? We're afraid of security threats or cryptocurrency or something, and you can monitor that, right? And Don or Joe, do you have examples where they monitor a risk, and if they see an alert triggered, that, in terms of Kyle's question about early warning systems, is that the way that these systems are used?
So I'll go first. I think, yeah, within our system, right? So if you had, if there was a specific KPI that is a risk indicator for you, all you'd have to do is set an alert in our system. And then as soon as that value fell to a certain point that you've listed as a threshold, our system would alert you so that you could go in and see what's going on. So I think that that's how you would use that, because you're not, if you're doing your job, you're looking at 1,000 things at once. And so having something that's going to flag this for you, is really nice, because then you can make those adjustments or address it where maybe you wouldn't find out for weeks or months or until a specific meeting that you might have. Now the system is going to tell you, like, hey, this value is lower than you'd like it to be. Let's go in and make some adjustments.
Yeah, in addition to that, one of the things, David, that you brought up, and the gentleman's question on this is, especially in the risk side, and actually in the banking industry, it's across the board. There's all kinds of indicators coming from the central banks, international monetary funds, all that kind of business. I mean, the one thing that I often tell executives or managers that are charged with the accountability of watching these particular objectives and key performance indicators and initiatives, you are not relieved of doing time in researching and reading up on what is out happening in your industry. And in the finance business, I mean, that is multifaceted across the globe. You could have something going on in Europe that's going to have a ricochet effect over here in the US. And if some manager or executive is not spending and investing the time to keep themselves knowledgeable of what's happening, it doesn't matter how good your strategy execution system is, you will lose that early warning intelligence that you should have at least been asking a question on in a conference room with a group that says, I just saw this. Does anybody else have any confirmation that this is moving in this direction? You can't turn it all over to the technology, or you can't turn it all over to AI. You got to have interfacing going on and talking between the groups.
Right. Another element to Kyle's question is about whether our strategy is working or not. And I'm wondering if there's anything else we could add on the idea of a strategy map where you say, we literally visualize how these objectives are related to each other. And we think that if we improve our security infrastructure, it's going to drive a reduction in security issues or something. Is there a cause and effect element that helps an organization understand whether their strategy is working or not visually, both from a strategy mapping standpoint on Joe's side and then on the software side with Don? Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the key element is, and I'm going back to the strategy execution cadence. Once you've put this system in place to do that monitoring and evaluation, if you align that directly to the strategy map, which it should be, and the KPIs and initiatives. But I often tell clients, once you've got a system in like Impact, you can start going into that system and create other KPIs or monitoring techniques that are not part of the strategy map, but are something that you as the owner would like to see information coming out that can give you more intelligence that something's happening that's not necessarily associated directly with the strategy map. And that then it becomes a true early warning system that you can be alerted on. Don?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect because, so within our system, you're able to create an unlimited amount of these scorecards, right? And so you have this ability to track all of these different metrics that are important to you, but maybe don't necessarily align the way they would in that strategy map. And so we have lots of organizations that maybe have just like key measures or an executive level, or like you talked about with ESG specifically, they have all these other metrics that are designed to show them how they're performing in all these different areas that don't necessarily roll up to the strategy map as it were. So within the system itself, they're getting the alerts, they're able to have briefings around all this information so they can constantly, see what's going on, make changes, in other parts of the business as well, without necessarily just relying on, okay, these are the 12 objectives and 80 KPIs that are in the strategy map. We might have 150 somewhere else that are helping us figure out how our organization is doing. So I think that that's a great point.
Very good. All right, we're winding down. Can y'all, we have 3 more minutes. Very quickly, last time I asked about change management. So if I'm in a bank and I'm interested in trying to readdress how we do strategy management, what are the change management elements I need to consider to make this happen? Joe, you want to go first?
Yeah, basically, first of all, you have to take a global look. And when you create a strategy and you create a implementation process like a balanced scorecard and impact to monitoring, you're working yourself through a massive change initiative anyway. And I can't emphasize that enough with clients when I'm working with them. And when I first bring this up, some of them I can see in their response, they didn't think about it that way. It was, here's the task, we got to do this, we got to do that, etc. It's a change process. So once again, you need to be able to feed back, in this case, to the tellers, to the loan officers, to the branch managers, anything like that goes on, because you need to make sure that they understand why they're doing it and what's the importance of it and what it means to the bank or to the branch about what's going on, so that human interfacing and dialogue needs to constantly stay in the mix. I mean, we fall too much into a repetitive pattern that, this month we're doing this month, and then we get to the end of the quarter. You got to step back and say the why concept, revisit that, and then say, everybody understand why we're doing this because what the outcome is. Don?
Yeah, I always look at it from a couple of perspectives. The first is obviously you need that buy-in about the organization, but then you also need the buy-in in terms of what's in it for them. And so how you involve them in this process, I think, is big, whether it's in the creation of the metrics, whether it's in the creation of different scorecards that they have access to so they can go in and see it. A lot of times what will happen is there'll be 1 or 2 people in charge of, generating the dashboards, and they sort of send them around, but everyone else, it's not part of their everyday culture to go in and look at them. And I think that that's where some of that buy-in comes from all those disparate levels, whether you turn it into like you have it with gamification, or you have one-on-ones every week or month with these employees based on the scorecards that are generated from the platform. They can see how their actual performance aligns with the strategic objectives of the organization. And I think it's like, hey, I'm coming to work every day and I'm doing these particular tasks, and now I can see my performance, but also how my performance affects the bank, right? And so that gives me a little bit more buy-in in terms of what I'm doing, because I know that I'm having a direct impact on the performance outcomes of the bank itself.
All right, very good. Well, we're out of time. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Don. Anything else to add?
No, good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, David.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, reach out. We'd love to give a demo to any of the banks on here.
All right. Well,
All
thank
right.
you all very, very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.